Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Old Head on the Porch. So for those of you who don't know, this is a series of videos where I just sit out on my front porch, have a beer, and chat a little bit with all of you about usually what's going on in the world of rock and metal. But today, I decided to change it up a little bit, and last week I posted in YouTube that this would be an AMA, which stands for Ask Me Anything. And a lot of you responded with questions. I got a shitload of questions. I mean, that depends on how you calculate a shitload, but I'm going to go with that. So I ended up choosing my 10 favorite questions out of all the ones that I was asked. Basically weighing them on how interesting they would be to answer, and also if I haven't answered a similar question before, because I did an AMA several months back, and I'll post the link to that down below, or at the end of the video there'll be a little link to go to the old AMA. But either way, I'm going to answer some fucking questions today. So first up, the beer of today is Oso Bueno, which means good bear, right? I think. And it is made by 11 Below Brewing, whatever, 11 Below. Also here in Houston, Texas. I'm all about repping the beer coming out of my new hometown. So before we do anything else, this is an amber ale, by the way. Not that I really even know the fucking difference. All right, I endorse this one. That is good. Anyway, so without further ado, let's get into the questions. I have them written down right here on a little piece of paper that has gotten crumpled up and wet, and it flew away from me at one point. It's a little bit windy here today. So question number one comes from Josh Allen, I think. It's a little wet right there. And he writes, are there any Christian metal bands or metal bands with Christian-based lyrics that you enjoy or respect? First off, Josh, thanks for the question. And so I thought about this one a lot because right offhand, I couldn't think of any bands that I listened to that had Christian-based lyrics. And then all of a sudden I remembered a few. King's X is one that comes to mind, although King's X started off having a little bit more of a religious tinge, because I don't think they were overtly religious lyrics, but they included things that were, you know, religious in subject matter, I guess. And then later on down the line, they kind of got rid of that. But other two bands that come to mind that I really like are Mortification, which was a death metal band. They may still be around, I'm not sure if they are, but I listened to them back in the 90s, and Mortification was a death metal band that, instead of having all the satanic imagery in their lyrics, they had biblical imagery. And then on top of that, there's a band that is called Believer, also around in the early 90s, and Believer was more of a technical metal band along the lines of what Death would do, you know, in their later albums, and they were really fucking good. But their lyrics were biblically themed. See, there's a reason why I'm not religious, because I can't say the word biblically. Okay, close enough. Anyway, hopefully that answers your question, Josh. Let's move on to question number two. This one comes from Bad Wolf Archives. And they ask, who is your favorite drummer of all time? If you can't decide, then name some of your personal favorites. First off, thank you for giving me that out, because it was very hard trying to think of one drummer that I loved. The one name that came to mind was Nick Menza, because Nick Menza, in my opinion, was a fucking amazing drummer and the best drummer that Megadeth ever had. Just watching the dude. Something about a guy that could play something so technically proficient, but at the same time lock down that fucking groove. Like he knew how to make a beat move you, and He's sorely missed. And then on top of that, I was like, oh, another one of my favorite drummers has also passed away, and that is Neil Peart from Rush. That one's kind of a duh. Who doesn't love Neil Peart? And then another one that I really like is Daler from Mastodon. And those are very sort of like technical drummers, like not so much, you know, groove oriented, because I do think that a drummer could be really good just holding down the fucking beat. There are some great drummers that don't go out of their way to be all flashy and shit. And then there are other drummers that I enjoy, but I don't think they're perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Charlie Benante, I really like his style, and he's the drummer of one of my favorite bands of all time, so you got that too. And Nico McBrain, also a really great drummer for Iron Maiden, if you didn't know. I like that guy. You hear him play, he kind of has his own thing going. But yeah, that's pretty much, I mean, I enjoy like your Dave Lombardos of the world and stuff like that. I just sometimes a drummer is just fun to watch, and sometimes they're just, you know, kind of boring. But yeah, so there you go. So we'll go with Nick Menza for narrowing it down to one, just because I feel like he's a little bit underrated for what he did. Anyway, thank you, Bad Wolf Archives. Question number 3. Hold on. Question number 3 is from Martin Gassa, and he asks, what do you think about musicians that express constantly their political opinions on the web? I love it. I grew up listening to rock and metal that was very political and had their political views right there in the fucking lyrics, and so I'm pretty used to it. And when it comes to like social media, like it doesn't bother me because you kind of expect it from certain artists, and I guess the ones that you don't, I guess to some people it could be a little bit jarring or a little bit annoying, but when it boils down to it, why should some guy from some small town who's a plumber have an opinion that matters and he can voice on the internet, but Axl Rose can't? You know what I'm saying? Like, they just have a bigger platform, but I think everybody's opinion is important. And so if I don't agree with somebody, like it has to take something major for me to just be like, I'm fucking done with you. But if that's the case, I'm an adult, so I will unfollow them, or if it's really bad, stop listening to their music. So I kind of want to know. I want to know these people that I love, and I love their music. So if they have something to say, especially in these times where there's a lot to talk about, if they want to make their voice heard, more power to them, because, you know, it's their right, and I don't have any problem with it. So thank you, Martine. All right. Question number 4 comes from Metalheaded, and he asks, how many records do you have, and when did you start collecting them? I have around 850 records, which that sounds low. Like I'm all like, oh man, I haven't broken 1,000 yet. Fuck, man, I got to get to work. But yeah, 850 records, and I started collecting records like seriously about 3 or 4 years ago, because I collected records when I was young. I had a lot of records when I was a kid and a teenager. And then, like a lot of other people in the 90s, records became shit for the old folks, and CDs was the way to go. Everybody is getting the CDs. And so I ended up getting CDs of all the albums I loved, and ended up selling off all of the vinyl that I had from back in the day. And so a few years ago, when I decided I wanted to start collecting again, I had to start from scratch. And so honestly, it's been fun, because it's not only been discovering new shit and buying vinyl from newer bands, but also going back and kind of filling in my own little autobiography in my record collection. So there's stuff that maybe I don't think is amazing, but it was really important to me when I was young, and I'll get those. And I'll, of course, like you've heard me say, I'll try to get the originals, and most of the time I will hold out for a fucking original, not first pressing, but you know what I mean, original run from whenever it came out. But yeah, So it's really, as an actual legit collector that was taking things seriously, it's just been 3 or 4 years, something like that. Not very long. I kind of jumped on the bandwagon with that. Anyway, all right. Thank you for that question, Metal-Headed. Question number 5 from 668, Neighbor of the Beast. They ask, if you could only keep one of your albums, what would it be and why? First off, fuck you for this question. Because it is hard. And you know what I did? I made myself completely forget about this question because I wanted to think about it right now while I'm on camera with you. So this is you see how I can't talk now? Because my favorite album of all time is Ride the Lightning by Metallica. But I'm assuming this is a desert island situation where I have one record, and I don't know if I would go with Ride the Lightning because I was a kid that grew up in the 80s, came of age in the late 80s and early 90s, and so I feel like I want something that has a little bit of a 90s feel while still maintaining the 80s shit that I loved. So I'm going to have to be really uncool and say I'd probably pick the Black Album by Metallica to bring with me, because it's Metallica, my favorite band, but also it reminds me of coming of age in the early 90s, when I really started getting into all sorts of bands and music was just exciting as fuck. But the Black Album was huge. Yeah, so I know it's not the coolest answer in the world, and I am not a very cool dude apparently. But yeah, I think that's probably, I'm not going to overthink it. I'm just going to take the Black Album with me. I'll probably get to the island and be like, oh man, I should have taken, you know, Sound of White Noise or something. I don't know. Yeah, picking one record is really hard. Picking 10 records is really hard. All right, moving on. Number 6 comes from Dennis Alexander, and he asks, best concert and why? Once again, I'm going to have to stick with the mighty Metallica. I first saw Metallica in 1994, and it's my favorite concert I've been to because it was my first really big concert, and it was one that was kind of cool. It was supposed to be cooler. It was supposed to be Metallica, Alice in Chains, and Suicidal Tendencies. And at the last minute, because of Lane Staley's drug addiction, he went into rehab. Alice in Chains canceled, and they were replaced by Candlebox. And then Fight was the band that started everything off. Fight was Rob Halford's band when he was not in Judas Priest for a little while. And it was just this big outdoor show at this place called South Park Meadows. Huge. Thousands and thousands of people everywhere, and the vibe was just really cool because, once again, I'm always going to bring up the late 80s and the early 90s. I think 94 was almost the point where it was tipping to where it wasn't going to be fun anymore, but it was still fun at this point where music was big. Everyone loved rock, everyone loved metal, and everyone was just having a great fucking time, and Suicidal Tendencies were fucking kick ass. And Candlebox were okay. I was disappointed I wasn't seeing Alice in Chains, so I don't think I really gave them the respect they deserved. But Metallica came on, and this was at the end of the Black Album touring cycle. Like, I think they had taken a break and then gone back out, and they were a fucking well-oiled machine. They were, I don't know. You can say what you want about 87, 88, era Metallica. They were really fucking good. But for some reason, as a live band in the early 90s, with the incorporation of the old stuff and the new stuff and just how tight they had become, it was just a fabulous fucking show. And I can still picture, the stage right in front of me. You can actually see a video of the entire concert on YouTube. I'll post that link down below. But it was just a really great memory for me, just being there in that environment and seeing all these great bands and experiencing this big show for the first time. So thanks, Dennis, for the question. Number 7 comes from Oracle Morkel, I think. Their question is, what inspired you to start doing podcasts? Okay, hold on. So, I've been a music fan and a rock and metal fan since I was a kid, since I was probably 9 or 10. And I've been so obsessed with bands and music for my entire life that I have watched probably thousands of hours of things on bands and read everything I could and done a whole lot of research, and I get really into bands where I want to know everything about them and the history of the band, and it's just one of those things where I've been doing it for, like, 30 plus years of me just being a complete nerd about all of this music that I love. And when I got into my 30s, I really noticed that I like to talk about it to people. But there aren't a lot of people that want to talk about the old school rock and metal. Hold on, we got a giant truck going by. Okay. So, and also, I don't have a lot of friends. I'm not good with friends. I'm kind of a loner, Dottie. I'm a rebel. And so as I got older, I was like, man, I just love talking about it so much, and I know a lot. Like, I have so much music knowledge in my head that it's pushed out other things like math and, U.S. history, like, other things that you learned, in school. That's all gone now. It's all taken up and filled up with music knowledge. And so I had the idea of doing a podcast for a while, but I was always just like, nobody's going to want to listen to it. And luckily, my wife, before she was my wife, when we were just dating, she talked me in to doing a podcast. And I just remember being like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna do it. Because, at this point, it's so easy to record something and put it out on the internet and just see what happens. And what happened was, at first, there weren't a lot of listeners. I don't even know if there are a lot now. I mean, here on YouTube, doing these videos, I've got almost 3,000 subscribers, so thank you. But that didn't matter, because I found out that I had such a fucking good time just talking, and I would pretend that I'm Christian Slater and pump up the volume. And there's kids in a school parking lot with their car stereos cranked up listening to me. And so that kept me going. And then once I got into doing the YouTube thing, I had a blast doing that too. Honestly, I think that if I had, just gotten 100 subscribers and that was it, I'd probably still be doing it, because it's just a lot of fun. So there's your answer, Oracle Morkel. How does the beer keep turning around? Do you see this happening on the thing? This is my first beer. There's no excuse. So question number 8 comes from that guy from the corner store. I think I remember seeing you. Do you have any advice for beginner metalheads? Yes. Don't listen to just me or just anybody else. Like, don't just get your opinions on things from one source. I would say don't use any sources at all. Just, if you see recommendations, don't read it. Just go listen to things and make up your own mind about stuff. But I just think that these days there's so much of a groupthink mentality with metal that it's like you're supposed to like these things and you're not supposed to like these things. And I'm like, that's complete fucking bullshit, and that's not the school that I came from. It's just one of those things, like back in the day. So here's how I would get into bands. So you watch MTV, late 80s, let's say it's 1989. You see a music video for a band. It's one song. You don't get to go to Apple Music or YouTube and search all the other shit they've done. You hear one song, and you decide off the strength of that one song if you were going to go to the record store and buy that album. Sometimes you would get burnt because you'd get a piece of shit that had one good song. Other times you would discover your new favorite band. So it's one of those things where you don't need a whole lot of information. If you really want to get into metal, just dip your toe in. And I guess in this day and age, it's really hard to avoid people's opinions, because here I am giving you my opinions as well. So just, I would say, take everyone's opinions with a grain of salt and then mash all those opinions together into one and create your own. Just, yeah. I'm not correct. I'm just a fan, and I like to talk about stuff. So yeah, just go your own way. As was it Fleetwood Mac? Did they do that song? Go your own way. So there you go. So question number 9. We're about to wrap it up, folks. Question number 9 comes from 8-Ball Bowler. I decided to answer his question because I keep not listening to a non-point song. It's built up to the point now that if I listen to it and I don't like it, I'm coming after you, dude. His question was, do you beard oil? I'm assuming he meant use. And if so, what kind? Yes, I use beard oil. Is there a specific kind? No. They're all made out of the same shit. I go for the cheapest kind that I can find that doesn't smell like fucking patchouli. So it's important to clean your beard and oil your beard. Just keep it looking nice. Don't be gross, folks. All right, last question of the night. This comes from Jacob Pollution. He asks, the Beatles, genius or overrated or both? All right. My answer is neither. I don't think they're genius. I don't think they're overrated. I think they are one of the most important bands that has ever existed in the history of music. Were they a perfect band? No. Did they write all great songs? No. Did they write some fucking incredible songs? Absolutely. But the big thing is you cannot discount the overarching influence that they have had over everybody you listen to. I don't care what you listen to these days. I'm willing to bet somewhere in that genre or somewhere in those bands there's a person that was influenced somehow by the Beatles, or they were influenced by somebody who was influenced by the Beatles. Like, it's just one of those things that I understand people like to talk shit because people try to put them on this huge pedestal, but I think it's warranted. Like, classic music is classic music for a reason, and with the Beatles, you just can't deny how important they were as a band, and they were a great band. But no, geniuses, no, because there were some stinkers in their music. And by the way, if any of you want to know, my favorite Beatle is Paul. I know that's not very cool, but I believe he was the best singer, the best songwriter, and seemed like the coolest dude. I mean, you hear some stories about John Lennon. I'm not going to say anything. I did this, and there's a microphone catching everything. I don't want the neighbors to know. Anyway, so yeah, the answer is neither. But I think the Beatles are very important. They're not a band I listen to a lot, but I know a shitload about them. Like I said before, I am a complete fucking music nerd, so of course I know a lot about the Beatles. But I also understand when people don't like them. Makes sense. Anyway, so there you go. It is fucking hot out here. I even waited till the sun was kind of going down. It doesn't fucking... Oh, there's a little bit of a breeze. I'm just going to take that in for a second. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to get the fuck off this porch and get inside in the air conditioning. But thank you all for submitting your questions. I'll do one of these again maybe in a few months down the line, so save up your questions in your head if I didn't get yours. And then, yeah. Thank you for watching Old Head Shit. Make sure you're checking out my new podcast, which is called Cranked and Ranked, which is me and a buddy of mine who lives in the UK, who is 20 years younger than me, and we rank the album discographies of all sorts of different artists, and we're about to do our first year, our top 5 albums of a year, coming up Wednesday. And it's great because you get these 2 different perspectives, 20 years difference, 2 different continents, and it's just us talking music like a bunch of fucking nerds. So if you like that kind of thing, you can see the videos here, or you can go to wherever you listen to podcasts and look up Cranked and Ranked, and you'll find it. So yeah, that's all I got. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all again very soon.